What's up YouTube, and welcome back to another Procreate tutorial where today we're going to go ahead and create this landscape that is inspired, of course, by one of the national parks over in Italy. It is a beautiful landscape with sheer cliff edges, but also green grass right up towards the top of it as well. It's a beautiful place and it's inspired today's design. Now I've gone ahead and added some artistic liberty. I've added in this meadow at the front here with some spring flowers. The landscape from the real world location is simply just as a reference and inspiration for today's design. We've simplified it in certain areas. Now for today, I've provided you, of course, with the palette so you can follow along with the exact same colors, the guide, and also the canvas size. All of the brushes are built into Procreate. Now you can grab all of those requirements from the post over on my Patreon, which is linked in the description down below. You're going to need to go ahead and grab all of those, and then you're good to go with today's design. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations wherever you decide to share them. And while you're over on my Patreon, check out the catalogue of exclusive tutorials I've got over there, because I've posted 3 every single month exclusively to my Patreon supporters, and the catalogue sits at well over 130 exclusive tutorials at the time of recording. And as I said, with 3 added every single month, it just continues to grow. So make sure to check that out, and you can support the work that I do here. Anyway, with all that said, enjoy today's tutorial, and let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, you'll be able to see on mine that I've added in my guide here, and there's little markers in each corner which then hopefully position it correctly. So if you haven't done that yet, just go up to your actions and go to the option of add and insert the photo here, and it will add it as a layer. Now just make sure you tap on it and rename it and call it guide, just so that you don't lose it. And then we're going to go ahead and change our background color. We're going to tap on background color and grab the color in the bottom right of the palette, then hit done. And then we're going to create our frame. So we'll create a new layer. Just make sure your color is set to white. So just grab your disk and double tap in the top left to select white. And your layer just wants to be at the very top. It doesn't really matter for a moment. Just set it to the very top and go to your brush. Go to the option of drawing and the Blackburn brush. And I reckon if you set the size to around about, say, 52%, you can create yourself a nice frame. And all you want to do is draw out what will ultimately be the canvas. And you can have some nice rough edges to it. You know, in the middle here, just quickly block it in, and then from there, just go a bit wider. You don't want to go to the edge of the frame. You don't want to go all the way to the the edge and have like a straight cutoff line. And you can see I'm just doing multiple kind of streaks outwards. I'm trying to then just rough up the edges, just so it's not sort of a boring canvas size. It looks quite unique, nice and fun. Just going to streak that across, a little something like that. There we go. And that will do as long as there's no gaps in between. Then what you want to go ahead and do is go to your layer. Let's create another layer above it. If we tap on the shape that we were just creating, so this layer here, tap on it and select the shape. So tap on select. It's really important that color fill is grayed out down here in the bottom right. You want to make sure it is grayed out and dark like this. Then go to the option of invert. Then go to your layer. Go up to the empty one and tap on it and fill it. Now what that'll have done is it'll have filled in the outside edge around your shape that you created. And then what you can do is you can delete that shape. Now at the top, you've got your frame. So you can tap on it, rename it, call it frame. And then that way, you know, it's nice and organized. And you can even move your guide above your frame as well, just so it is nicely safe. Everything under the frame as well will work. So let's start on an empty layer underneath the frame. If you haven't got one yet, just create a new one. Go to your colors and let's grab the color here. It's the top of the 4th column. You still want to be with the Blackburn brush. It's the majority brush for today. I'm going to bring it down to about sort of 19%, I reckon. And we're going to go ahead and draw in based on these lines here. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn my particular guide down. You'll be able to see it on your own screen as well as mine, just lightly. And I'm on that empty layer underneath the frame. I'm just going to go ahead and draw in all the basics. So starting over here, I just want to go ahead and draw this in, swoop it all the way down into the corner, coming across like this. Now, the lines here that we're creating at this particular point, these are the ones on the grassy side. So what you're creating right now will ultimately be the nice luscious green tones. This is just your base color for it. And I can see that I actually need to go ahead and get a lot closer to this edge up here, because it's sometimes a bit nerve-wracking with this brush getting and creating sort of shapes right at the edge. You can always bring the size down. So I initially had it at 18. I'm going to bring it down to like a 5 and just try and sharpen up any edges that I feel is necessary. Just creating a bit of a sharper point on the end there, and maybe fill that in too. Likewise here, I just need to go ahead and connect these together, and it doesn't matter necessarily about the angle just at the moment. I'm going to let that run a little bit beyond the left-hand side of the screen there. That's fine, little cutaway. And then down here, we'll just swoop that down like so. Then at the back here, I'm going to stick with the 5% brush size just for a minute because we've got some quite sharp lines here that I want to definitely try and make sure we get nice and sharp and also a little bit thin as well. You know, I don't want them to have too much bulk to them. I'm just going to run that in here, and it doesn't need to be perfect. You can see that doesn't really sort of 100% marry up to the guide, and that's fine. I'm going to run that down here, and the angles are all changing, and it just needs to be a bit minimal and simple, you know. And we're going to run then this one here all the way down. Now that one needs to have a good amount of sort of angle to it and sharpness. So I'm going to run that in. I'm going to connect it together, mind you, and then let that just run up into there, and then connect that in, and maybe even make some of these a little bit more curved at the peak, just to kind of show the sort of graduation in the sort of sharpness at the very top here. So I'm going to go ahead and just curve that up ever so slightly, and then try and just bulk out the top a bit more. Triple checking I filled it all in correctly. I think the only other thing I could do is maybe connect these two a little bit closer. We're not trying to marry up to the real world landscape. We're just trying to use that as a bit of just a bit of inspiration, really. So a little something like this. And when you're done, go to your layers and create another new layer and drag it underneath that shape. Go to your colors and then grab the color that we need for the dark side there, which is actually going to be the bottom of the fifth column. And then from there, we're just going to go ahead and just fill in off of here, making sure you've gone all the way to the edge with the previous shape. You can just color all of this in down here, a little bit then in this gap here too, so that you've got like the fall off side of it. And then you just want to go ahead. I'm going to set my brush size down to like a 2% just so I can guarantee that it's nice and sharp coming off of this point up here, because I need to go ahead and make sure that that has a bit of a stagger like that. And then I can just color that in. So I can just draw in a triangle shape as I'm doing right now, and drag and drop the color in, and then tidy up any gaps as well. From there, we also want to go ahead and maybe introduce one off of that area there too, just to show that, again, steepness and sharpness of the landscape. Then we're going to add in the mountain shape in the background. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers and create another new layer. Drag it underneath the last one we were working on and go to your colors. We want to be this color here, top of the second column from the right. And you can see the mountainous shape in there. So if I keep my brush size nice and small, I can just kind of sketch in the outer shape of it and just make sure it's a nice solid shape. That's all we want, really. Just a little something solid. And I'm going to go up to my main peak there, let that sort of run off, and then let that come down in there. And I'm going to let that come down and kind of follow suit with the land a little bit, and then go all the way around to my start point and drag and drop the color in, tidy up any edges that I may or may not need to do. And you can, maybe just introduce something else down here too if you need to. And then you should now be able to see your dark side of the landscape as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and just very quickly just go back to the top of the fourth column and go back to the layer for the dark blue there. I'm going to tap on that. I'm just going to try and just sharpen up a few little edges there with the 2%, just making sure we've got some nice kind of street land here. And I actually want to go ahead and just tidy up here, because this is looking a bit too paint strokey up here. And I will of course need to touch up the gray that sits in behind, but I just want to get rid of that kind of paint stroke. I don't mind a couple of like the strokes going upwards like that, but I don't want that grain. So I'll switch back to the gray, which is the bottom of the fifth column, and just connect that together. Sometimes I keep things like this in videos just so you can see what I would have adjusted as I go. From there, we'll go ahead and create the foreground as well. So we'll go ahead and underneath our frame, we'll tap on the next layer down. We'll create a new layer. We'll go to our colors and grab the top left of the palette. And this is going to go ahead and be our foreground. And that's going to want to be roughly around about, say, here. And we're going to just swoop in a bit of a diagonal line. I'm going to set the size to about 10%. I'm just going to color it in manually. And I want to make sure that it kind of has like a bit of a kind of bump on the left-hand side almost. And then just kind of falls off at the bottom right. Just so we've got some sort of swooping lines. We're all pointing into this corner down here. We may adjust this later on, but for now that'll do. Let's go ahead and start working on all of the layers. So we're going to start first of all in the background on the sky. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer and drag it all the way down to the very bottom in front of your background. We are going to go ahead and go to our colors and grab the color in the top right of the palette, continuing with the Blackburn, but bring it down to say 50% and put the size at something really large, around about 50 to 60. And all you want to do is just create some lines going left to right, do it in one brush stroke like I'm doing now, and then let go. And then just layer that on again. And you just want to create a nice gradient up in the sort of the bottom area up towards the top of your sky. A little bit of a swoop to it, just so it kind of follows suit. Now we are going to blur this, but I just want to get the color in there with this first of all, so I can get a bit of a patchiness to it. Then go to my adjustments, Gaussian blur, and swipe from left to right until you get a really smooth gradient. Now you can bring that gradient down if you want to like a 12%. In my pre-practice, I went all the way up to 26. But if you want to and you want to get like a little bit of kind of other tones here, like I can see that there's like a little bit of the shapes that I created there coming through, you can do that too. I think I'm going to go up to 24 though and tap on my adjustments when I'm done. I'm equally going to go ahead and we can do it on the same layer. We're going to go to our colors and grab the middle of the far right column. Your brush wants to be changed to airbrushing and the soft brush. I've got the size set to 41%. I'm just going to go around in a bit of a circular motion just down here with a little bit of yellow. There we go. Keeping it nice and light. Don't do it too much. Keep it nice and light. Let's work then on the mountain at the background. So let's go ahead and tap on the mountain. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. And I'll swipe from left to right on both and group it together and rename the group mountain. If I move a bit too fast there, you can always slow me down in the YouTube player, but the steps are very common to something I've done before. So hopefully it's not something too quick. You've done it before. Now on this empty layer here, we're going to go to our colors and grab the middle of the second column from the right. Our brush wants to be changed back to drawing and the Blackburn. I'm going to go back up to 100% opacity. I reckon size around, we could go 28, we could even go in the middle. Let's go 15. And let's just create a little bit of an accent of the highlighted side here of our mountain. So we're just trying to show a little bit of kind of detail. I'm going to drop it down to the 10. And then your lines don't all need to follow suit. They can go all over the place. Predominantly this right edge over here is where we're adding in the lighting, of course, and then maybe it trickles round a tiny bit onto this mountainscape in behind, and maybe there's a few random lines in there that just get a little bit of color. You know, keep it nice and fun. Point your pen down to get some nice straighter lines as well if you need to, and just a little something like this will do the trick. And I'm going to in fact go all the way up, cover that whole right side, but leaving gaps is like really important because it gives you contrast. And then maybe a speck back there. From there, we'll add in the shadows. So we'll go ahead and we can do it on the same layer or you can do it on a separate layer. I typically create a separate layer and tap on it and clipping mask it. Then go to my colors and I'll grab the top of the third column from the right. And then let's just streak in some color down here like this. And for a minute, they're pretty dark, but that's just so we can see them. We're going to tone them down in a second. And you're basically just doing the opposite to what you just did on the opposite side there. Again, you don't have to do absolutely everywhere. You can leave gaps. It'll look great when you do. A couple of dark shadows in there. And then just doing them at the angle and the opposite angle. So these ones go sort of top left to bottom right. These ones now go top right to bottom left. But a little bit of a sort of rotation on there just to show potentially the change in the landscape and the flow of it. And you can even go ahead and, for example, just get down into like here, add in some little dashes along there too, showing a little bit of a shadow on that highlight side. And as I mentioned, we'll go ahead and tap on this layer. We'll tap on it and bring its opacity down. We don't want it anywhere near as strong as that. I reckon something around about sort of 50% will do the trick. And then the final thing to do in terms of sort of the rocky scape of it, we'll create a new layer again, tap on it and clipping mask it. Go to your colors. Grab the bottom of the second column from the right, and we're going to move over to where we added in those highlights before. And I reckon around about 5% brush size, and you can just streak in some color on those edges and just kind of show where are the main areas that are definitely getting the majority of the light. You could just focus it on the top edge if you want to. You know, you can add it to some edges down here if you feel like that's necessary. You can even introduce new elements if you want to. maybe a little streak back there as well. Just adding in just a little bit of extra sunshine onto this side of the mountain, like so. And on that layer, we can equally go ahead and tap on it and bring its opacity down as well. Just tone it down a tiny bit. 60 to 65% looks pretty good. It just varies it slightly from the color that we placed originally, but still it gives you that little accent of highlight, but it's not too bright. Now there's one more layer to actually introduce here. We're going to go ahead and tap on the top layer that's clipped and create a new layer. Don't clip it. Go to your colors and grab the color in the bottom right of the palette. Your brush wants to be back to airbrushing and the soft brush. Yeah, size can be around about, say, 30%, that's no problem. Just towards the bottom there, just lightly start to bring in a bit of kind of hazy kind of environmental kind of glow down here. Just a little bit tucked in behind your mountain there. And just kind of separating it from the land in front here. Now down here, you don't want to go too ham, because if for example, if I did this, you're blocking your sunlight glow a little bit. So try to just kind of be directional and point it downwards into this corner. But on the back there, you can just kind of tone it down and just blend it out into the rest of the sort of sky blue colors. If that's a little bit too strong, you can always go ahead, of course, and tap on it, bring its opacity down and just adjust it if needs be. Everybody's will look slightly different from time to time, and just make the adjustments freely on your own. Now let's go ahead and collapse the mountain down. Let's go up to the next layer, which is in fact the shaded side of our mountain. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. Let's tap on it and clipping mask it. Swipe from left to right and group them together. And let's rename that and just call it shadows. Or shadows, either way. On this empty layer here, go to your colors. Then grab the top of the fifth column. Your brush wants to be set then back to the option of drawing in the Blackburn. 100% opacity and size, I reckon you can set it to around about, say, 10%. And just follow suit with the angles that you've drawn in. The only thing that's apparent is where you can see this blue and the grey, you kind of just want to show this area of land here. So just for a minute, just drop it down to say 2% and get a line coming off of that very peak there at the top, just so you can separate it. And then just tip your pen on its side if you want to make it larger. This brush is really quite versatile. And then just wiggle that into here, follow in suit with the angle. Occasionally just have some lines going at slightly different angles as well. And then again at the top here, just kind of sheer rock all the way down. And in that gap there, you don't necessarily need to add anything, just the tiniest little bit near it will do the trick. And again, in this one, maybe a little bit. Over here, I definitely want to add some here as if it's just small areas of rock just been between some grassy area. And let's add in like a few little streaks towards the bottom. Lovely. And again, all I want to do is make sure that that's got quite a solid line off of it, just to kind of separate it a tiny bit. We're going to go ahead and add in some slightly brighter tones. So let's create another new layer. Tap on it and clipping mask it. Go to your colors and we'll grab the middle of the fifth column. And then go against those lines ever so slightly in terms of angles. So for example, just go against them, creating sort of grooves and like cuts through your rock. Again, you could highlight that very top edge there just to bring it out of the scene a bit more. And just like add in angles at all sorts of direction, which is just like, you're just trying to show the sort of, all the nature of the rock is just all over the place. You can change it to a 5% brush if you want and put some chunky lines in there. It doesn't need to be sort of all the same. Now in a minute, we're going to bring back in our shadows. So don't worry if you've equally added in quite a lot like me, we can always tone it down in just a second. So I'm just going to add in some dashes in here, a little bit on the rear there. And then as I said, we'll go ahead and create another new layer. We'll tap on it and clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors and grab the original color, which is the bottom of the fifth column. And if you set your size to something nice and small, like a 2%, you can now start carving. I love this part of the sort of rock. Carving away back into there, and you can just reimagine and revitalize a lot of these sort of areas here that you've maybe added in a little bit too much color to. I wanted to add a separating line there between the rear and this area here. And then just down here, for example, I'm going to go ahead and hack away into there. And anywhere I think that there'd be a shadow, I'm just going to try and bring that back to life a little bit. And don't be afraid of really being quite sacrificial. Like there, I'm just cutting away into here. you can see that there really is a sort of a nod and emphasis on the kind of messy aesthetic for today. So you don't need to really focus in and sort of carve rock meticulously. Just take your time just to cut away, but that's all you need to do. And you can always go ahead and grab your eraser and hold down on your eraser and it'll switch it to the Blackburn brush. And then you can just go ahead and bring that back in because you're technically erasing from the dark lines that you've laid over the top. Let's go ahead then and move on to the green side. This will all come together. So go ahead and collapse that down. We're going to go ahead and tap on our big area of blue for the green and we'll create a new layer. Tap on it and clipping mask it. Swipe from left to right and group them together and just we'll call this greens. The empty layer here, go ahead and go to your colors and we're going to move to the middle of the fourth column. Let's set the brush size to about 10%, 100% opacity, and we're going to follow suit with the lines. Now, if you need to, you might need to go ahead and tap on your guide and invert it. And then you'll see the white lines appear again. That may help you. So make sure you're on the new clip layer that we created, of course. And at the front here, your lines can be nice and big and chunky and like really, you want to leave occasional little scrapes of the blue in between because then it shows like a shadowy tone. But you want to make sure your lines are a little bit more horizontal in this area here. Towards the rear here, you want to potentially bring your brush down to even something as small as a 2%. So you can be very, very thin and do the same thing, but you can build in a lot more because the landscape, of course, is getting further back. A lot of this area is going to start to, you're going to need to add in more and more of it to just simply fill the space. Those lines there want to be nice and sharp. And you kind of want to whip them down into this area here where the land it seems to just drastically increase in the actual sort of verticality of it. You end up with these really sharp lines in here and you can end up with this nice messy aesthetic. I think it looks fantastic. Now in the real life actual reference back here is not quite so green. So we're going to hold down on our eraser again. We're going to go ahead and then set the brush size to about 2%. And now just carve into here and lose a lot of the greens because back here is quite barren. It turns a little bit more into like a bit of a rocky scape rather than grassy. So I'm just doing kind of crisscross lines here, tipping my pen on its side occasionally as well to kind of just deteriorate some of the greens there to give me that variety, but equally give myself some space for some greens. So there's a little bit of a balancing act, but you can see there it looks a lot more sort of detailed in terms of it's a bit more rocky look to it. And that's where this brush is going to really help us. So next, let's go ahead and add a brighter green to this. So let's go to our colors and grab the bottom of the fourth column. Let's go back to our layers. Let's create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. If you set your opacity now to 50%, you can take your time now building up some highlight. And so for example, here, I'm going to go ahead and just follow suit with the flow of the land. So I'm going to go 10% here at the front, and just follow suit. If I do it in one brush stroke, just to start with, I end up with like a nice blanket of green. And then from there, I can run in layers on top of that and add in beautiful additional tones in here. I wouldn't overdo this green, if I'm honest. I would keep it a little bit sort of minimal, especially here at the front. Just end up with some beautiful, simple lines running in. Then I'm going to go ahead and just rotate my canvas because I want to follow suit here. We're not clipped to this green, remember? So I'm just going to go ahead and follow suit here. I might even bring the opacity down to 24%. And just add in like a bit of a green tone on there. And then maybe just like a little something like this, just catching the side of the landscape, maybe a little bit in here too. But you can get back in there, especially with a 24%, and just add in patches of color that you really want to sort of emphasize and where the sun perhaps is landing. At the back here, we're going to go ahead and set the size to like a 2%. And you want to be quite particular because you don't want to ruin the work that you've already done. So you can tip your pen on its side, but also just lightly kind of graze over a few of those areas. Don't be afraid occasionally though to really go over yourself a few times and punch in the color and then whip that down into that corner like so. And you should end up with this beautiful bright green here at the front, and it slowly just transitions off at the back. It's not to say you can't have like a yellowy spot back there. By all means bring the opacity back up to 50% and the brush size up to say 5, and just add in like a bit more like detail and something that's a little bit more catching of the green in there, just to add in a little bit more variety to the textures and colors. Let's get right up into here and just add in the tiniest little bit. I'm trying to be extremely cautious and quite minimal with it. I don't want to add in too much up there, just a little bit up towards that top peak. Now we're going to go ahead and go to our layers and create a new layer. We will tap on it and clipping mask it. And we're going to go to our colors and grab the blue again, bottom right of the palette. Brush wants to be set back to airbrushing and the soft brush. But if we set our size to around about say 15 to 20%, just along here and towards the bottom here, we're just going to fade this out a little bit because I kind of want to blend the two sort of areas together a little bit back there. I want to have it so like where does this land here technically end and where does that mountain in the background take over? And if you kind of haze them out a little bit, it's a bit tricky to see. Because again, in the real world reference of this, these are connected completely. So you could even, for example, create a new layer that's not clipped. Go to your colors and even just grab this, say the lighter tone, top right of the palette. Bring that brush size down to like an 8% and just very, very lightly, maybe a bit bigger. Just go over here and kind of fade them out like this. So you end up with these beautiful blues over there, but it should just hopefully fade out the land a little bit. And you could do that in multiple places if needs be. For example, you could do a little bit of blue back here too, just a little bit lighter, just a tiny bit, but hopefully it blends those two worlds together. Let's add in a really simple but yet fun foreground area down here. So we're going to go ahead and collapse the greens down. We've got the foreground layer here. We can just simply go ahead and tap on it and alpha lock it. We'll go to our colors and grab the middle green in the middle of the first column. The brush wants to go back to the main one we're using, which is of course under drawing. It's the Blackburn. We'll set the brush opacity to 100% at the foreground with this green and about 19% with the opacity, the brush size. We're just going to whip the green in through here, leaving the gaps in between if possible. You know, just like a little bit of those dark tones coming through just look great. So a little bit of luscious green. Then go to your colors and grab then this color here, bottom left of the palette, but bring the opacity back down to 50. And size, I would imagine, bring that down to about 5. You want to take your time, just sort of layering in some brighter tone here again in a similar way that we did back there. So it's nothing new necessarily. It's just in a different area. So I'm doing that all in one brush stroke and then going back through it again, trying to layer in some bright tone here, predominantly on this left-hand side, just as the light perhaps is coming across, catching on that edge, and then maybe like another bright patch, say like here, for example. But I always let the colors just nicely fade out at the bottom into the edge of the scene. I don't really want to sort of focus on it too much, just allow it just to blend out into the corner edges where I don't really give too much attention. What we'll then do is we'll go ahead and tap on this layer and we'll turn off the alpha lock. We're going to go to our smudge tool. We can tap on smudge. Now, beforehand, I used the old brush. You could use something that is a singular brush stroke and really meticulously take your time with it. The old brush will give you a little bit of a blur to it as well. So what you can do is you can set the brush size down to like a 3%. You can get up here and then you can just flick the colors. And so what you're looking to try and flick, say like these dark greens that I've got here on the border of the land. Just trying to fluff up the edge a little bit. In a minute, we're going to add a bit of that blue haze as well in behind here, so you'll be able to see your grass a little bit more. And then what you want to do is you kind of want to focus then on the next color, which is this kind of light green here, and flick that over the top then of the light green, the slightly darker green. And then that way you end up with the contrast enough that you can see the difference. I could, for example, pick out this color here, if I can manage to smudge from it. If I don't, it's not really a problem, but you can just flick out from there and try to isolate some grassy blades as well. Like here, I could go ahead and try my best to flick out some of these dark blades here, just with the smudge, and just seeing what you can come up with. In here, for example, if I smudge here, you can't really see a difference. You need to smudge a color on top of another one, of course, just to see that variation, which is where then when you've got this dark color here in the corner, in a minute, you can go ahead and get in there and really kind of smudge as much as you like. And as we get closer towards the camera and a bit more towards the bottom left of the frame, you can move to like a 10% and just really go for it and create those grassy blades. Look at that. And then flick up those dark blades on top of the light ones. You always want to start from the top and make your way down, especially if that's where your colors are coming from, because I can't now get in behind there. So I'd have to undo that and then go again with this smudge down here first. And perhaps the brush size is a bit big. So if I go for the 6% in the middle. I can just get some greens in there, then get these dark greens, flick them over the top, and I can build up this grassy landscape here. And then I can even go ahead and flick up some of the dark tones here right in the corner, just to add in again a bit more sort of variety to it. And also that layering and staggering of everything. Very, very cool aesthetic to this. And of course, just remember, the further you go back, the smaller you want to be with the brush size. So I think something like that is almost perfect. I could maybe just whip up a few more of these grass areas here at the foreground just to add in a little bit of extra scale to it. But that looks quite pretty to me. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is move it into the flowers. And that's just as simple as creating a new layer. Go into your colors. We've got these beautiful colors here, including the pink. So I'm going to start with the red, top of the 5th column from the right. Brush, Blackburn, still under drawing. Set your brush opacity to around about, I reckon around about 80 to 90%, or even a little bit higher. And then brush, let's go 5%, and just tap. Just adding in and varying pressures. The harder you press, the larger the sort of splash of color will be. And of course, the further you get further back here, closer to the edge, you want to make sure maybe you're a little bit lighter with the pressure and the application of the pressure, just keeping it a little bit lighter back there. You could potentially just tip your pen on its side and add in like a big sort of meadow of color. But here at the foreground, you can purposely add in some flower-like shapes if you want to, really sort of splash the color out in a bit of a flowery kind of formation. Totally up to you. We've got multiple colors, so don't go too crazy at the front here. And you can always add some down here too. Again, maybe a little bit further back, you just sort of tip your pen on its side to add in like a, I think this brush is fantastic for this. It gives you like that kind of meadowy look and a scattering of lots and lots of tiny little specks in there, as if there's like a whole load of flower. And if you get a line, just hold down on your eraser. It will change it to the Blackburn brush, and then just break it up, tap in a few times. So before you go too mad with the red, go to your colors and grab the orange in the middle of the 4th column from the right again. Brush, still the same Blackburn brush, and just get in there then and add in some more. So you've got some beautiful orangey tones here. And don't be afraid to really pack them in at the foreground. It's more the scale, making sure all the flowers get a little bit further back and a little bit smaller. That's a bit more critical. I'm probably going to leave that a little bit like that. I'm not going to add in too much with this. So I'll then go back to my color. I'll grab the yellow at the bottom of that same column, add in some more, and you can chuck the color in between as well. Some of the bigger sort of splattering of flowers you've added, as if they're like a variation to some of the petals, or you can add them in as if they're just flowers. This is a really sort of very simple way of adding in flowers and not overthinking it. You just want to go ahead and allow this to have that beautiful painting aesthetic to it, and you don't need to sort of stress necessarily over actual details necessarily. It's just all about giving the impression of things. Then go to your colors and grab the pink. It's the top then of the 5th column from the right. This one's slightly lighter, and again, by all means, get in there with some of your flowers, some of your reds, get in there with some pinks. And otherwise, add in some new flower in here. Keep tapping away, just adding in beautiful, beautiful flowers. And again, this one's got a very sort of spring-like aesthetic to it. It's very joyful, very fun. I hope you're enjoying it. Let's just tip our pen on its side ever so slightly at the back there, just to add in a bit of a scattering of this kind of pinkish tone. And I know we added the blades back there, but they could be bushes necessarily now. The scale, your brain will kind of work it out, to be honest. But I focused a lot of the attention in this bottom left-hand side there. Now, as I mentioned, we'll just add in a tiny bit of sort of environmental haze behind there. So we'll go ahead and create a new layer and just drag it underneath the grassy greens that we've got here at the front. Go back to your colors. You can grab the blue or the top right, either. I'm going to grab the bottom right of the palette. Go back to my brush and change it to airbrushing and the soft brush. Get that size around 9%, I reckon, if not slightly larger, because then if you go slightly larger, about 20, you can just take your time. Look how low I am, just building up like a bit of a color, just using the edge of the brush. And just a little bit of blue just down in there, and just let it kind of fade out at the top. It doesn't need to be kind of blue. It can be blue down here, but not quite so much up in that top left area. Now, because we've got things on separate layers, and you may or may not want to do this, you can go ahead and go down to your mountain group. The actual mountain shape of it, perhaps this is a little bit too sharp here with the actual shaping of the mountain. So you could go to your adjustments and Gaussian blur and just swipe from left to right, just softening the edge up the tiniest bit. So we've gone up to 3%, and you just drag from left to right. And if I do that again, you can see it increases at the top there. You can just drag it from left to right, just softening up the edge. You could go quite a lot higher, but I think 3 keeps a good solid amount of the structure. So about sort of 3%, I reckon. And tap on your adjustments when you're done. That should just soften it, make it a bit more pleasing. And when you're done with today's design, pinch with 2 fingers, go full screen with 4, and you end up with today's finished piece. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations wherever you decide to share them, like Instagram and Facebook. They're great places for me to see your work. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for weekly Procreate tutorials. But if you want even more tutorials from me, you can come and join me over on Patreon. That's where I post 3 more exclusives every single month to my Patreon supporters, as well as early access to tutorials. And patrons also get access to the entire catalogue of all the previous Patreon exclusive tutorials that I've made as well, which is well over 130 at the time of recording. So make sure to check that out using the link in the description down below. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll probably love the one that I posted a couple of weeks ago as well. It's a very similar kind of aesthetic, same brush sets as well. So you'll be able to create a whole different type of design, but with a similar kind of theme. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.